OK, let's bring you more on that breaking news out of northern Israel. We're getting reports of a drone strike in Binyamina near the city of Haifa. At least 39 people now have been injured. That's the latest that we're getting. Ori Goldberg is an Israeli political commentator who joins us from Tel Aviv. Ori, I'm sure you are trying to get to the bottom of all of this in terms of the impact there in Binyamina. What are you hearing?
Pretty much what you just reported, that there was impact, that there was no alarm raised. That means this drone got by our air defense and warning systems, and that there are people hurt, quite a few of them in severe and or critical fashion. There are several military targets in the region, I would assume, especially when one considers the number of casualties that this drone hit one of those targets.
How significant, Ari, is it for no alarm to have been raised, given the layer upon layer of Israeli air defenses that the country has?
It's very significant. I'll share a personal anecdote. The drone that hit Israel on Friday evening landed about 7 houses from where I live. Then there was an alarm. The fact that there is no alarm now means that some loophole has been found by Hezbollah. And this is significant, not just in terms of discovering Israel's air defense system's weakness, but also when one thinks of it in the context of Israeli statements about how Hezbollah is down to 30% of its rockets, and Hezbollah has been decimated, and Hezbollah is not functioning. It appears that Hezbollah is functioning quite well, and that discrepancy, which unfortunately has become quite par for the course for official Israeli statements, is of tremendous significance.
Yeah, those statements coming from Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, who was very keen to show that Israeli operations against Hezbollah have been successful. Nevertheless, it doesn't appear to be the sophisticated weapons that were involved here, but something lesser, a suicide drone or a kamikaze drone, as they're called. What does that say to you?
It says that Israel invested a great deal of money in technology, and just like Israel built the world's largest, most expensive subterranean obstacle to stop Hamas tunnels, and then was surprised by a very ordinary military attack, Israel's high-tech preparation for a potential Hezbollah offensive apparently has left it open to low-tech weaponry. Some would call it a lack of strategic forethought. Some, when one considers Israel's suicide drone sales across the world, would call it karma.
I wonder what the impact there will be amongst Israel's civilian population in and around Haifa and the town of Binyamina. It's a country where people are used to aerial attacks. People are used to responding to air raid sirens. The idea now that there is, as you say, this loophole in their defences. What do you think the likely ramifications will be of that?
I would assume they would simply be more support for this quote-unquote war effort, because your run-of-the-mill Israeli would look at this and say, here's proof that we should take our future into our own hands and make sure that these enemies cannot fire on us at will. So I would not assume you'll hear any real criticism of the government. Perhaps you'll hear criticism of the tactical and operational preparations and the civil defense array, but I doubt you will hear any kind of criticism about the war itself. I would assume that pro-war sentiments, which are now a broad consensus in Israeli society, will simply grow stronger.
So pro-war sentiments may deepen in the wake of an attack like this. Retaliation, then, we assume, is inevitable.
Well, you know, Israel is bombing Lebanon incessantly and operating on Lebanese territory. You don't have to call it retaliation anymore. Israel is engaged in a full frontal offensive against Lebanon. You know, there's no real way to separate initiative from retaliation. This is a war. I think the main significance here has to do with the narrative Israel wishes to produce about its ongoing stream of successes, as opposed to its inability not just to actively defend citizens and soldiers, but to even have proper alerts.
All right, Ori Goldberg, many thanks for talking us through all of that. We will, of course, try and get more information on this moving story. A recap of those developments out of northern Israel. We are hearing of at least 39 people injured, some of them critically after a drone exploded in the town of Binyamina. The assumption is that that was fired from Lebanon. All of that needs to yet be established. But Binyamina is a town in the Haifa district of Israel. Haifa, as you probably know, a major city in the north of the country, a port city, a site of important strategic value to the Israelis as well. Nour Odeh joins us from Jordan's capital, Amman, to talk about this in a bit more detail. Just a reminder that the Israeli government's banned Al Jazeera from reporting both in the occupied West Bank and inside Israel. Nour, what are you hearing in terms of the Israeli perspective on this?
Well, Niamh, we know that 39 people are confirmed injured. The images emerging out of that area show people in uniform. And we also know we received a claim of responsibility from Hezbollah a few moments before news started coming out of the Binyamina area in Haifa that they had targeted a military camp in that area. We're still waiting for an official statement from the Israeli army. The Israeli media is reporting a large contingent of ambulances. Some of the critically injured were taken by helicopter. This is the largest attack, drone attack, that we've seen in an entire year. In fact, ever, because these drones have only come into play in the past year. They are far more difficult to detect, as we've been saying, and the Israeli army, according to media reports, is investigating why the sirens, which usually go off when something foreign, undetected, unknown is in the air, and why Israel's very sophisticated air defense system was unable to intercept that drone before it exploded in that large crowd of people, which appear perhaps to be of soldiers.
Yeah, you raise an important point, Nour, that despite all of the top-level technology that Israel has to precisely keep an eye on the skies, particularly when they are at war with Hezbollah, an incident like this happens. But interesting also that you point out the intended target appears to have been a military camp, and there have been these claims of responsibility by Hezbollah. It does beg the question, how does Israel now calibrate its response?
Well, I mean, it's difficult to measure, and as your guest was saying earlier, there is a war right now raging, and we've been covering, our teams on the ground in Lebanon have been covering day in and day out the mass casualties among civilians in Lebanon, the targets up and down Lebanese territory, the factories, the buildings, the homes that have been targeted. So it would seem logical, given the trend that we've seen over the past 2 weeks, that there would be an escalation in Israeli attacks. But again, this is a never-ending loop. So long as there's nobody talking about a ceasefire, we will see a continuation of this. That is what the Israelis are promising, but it's also what we're hearing from Hezbollah. In the past 2 hours, we heard from the Israeli Minister of Defense. He was actually in Lebanese territory, and he said that the first line of Lebanese villages in southern Lebanon are considered hostile territory, hostile Hezbollah targets that must be demolished. So this is the kind of rhetoric that we hear. This is the kind of mood that is governing all those actions. And we've been covering the story about UNIFIL, the UN observers who are there from 50 different countries. They've been under attack as well. Nobody's talking about how to end this, how to put an end to this or to stop it. And the air defense systems obviously are not foolproof. So you will see casualties like this or incidents like this where they simply do not work and fail the public.
Nour, I don't want to connect the dots that don't need connecting right now, but this attack appears to have taken place 24 hours after a visit by Iran's parliamentary speaker in Beirut, where he spoke, giving very much a show of solidarity, reminding the world and Lebanon that there is a role for Iran in its continued support of Hezbollah. Do we read any significance into that?
Yeah, well, the Iranian foreign minister has been visiting the whole region. We saw him in Beirut. We saw him today in Baghdad. We saw him earlier in Saudi Arabia. And the Iranian president was in Qatar even before that. So there's a lot of diplomatic activity from Iran. And as you said, it's not just to seek an end to this war, an end to the escalation, but to also remind everybody that Iran is not a player that you can write off. And since the beginning of the war on Gaza, since the beginning of this genocide, Neve, we've heard from the allies of the Palestinian people and from this, what is called the Iranian axis, if you will, for lack of a better terminology. We've heard from Hezbollah and from groups in Iraq, from the Houthi in Yemen, from Iran itself, that they will not abandon Gaza, that they will not abandon the Palestinians, they will not allow Israel to defeat Gaza. And that's how we saw an escalation followed by another, and this domino effect leading to an all-out war in Lebanon. So it would be logical to assume that Iran would not also abandon Lebanon now that it's been dragged and sucked into this war because of its solidarity with the Palestinians, with Hamas, and with Gaza. There's a lot at play here, and it's very easy to forget that what is happening is not disconnected. This is one big story with a lot of regional ramifications, and it is part of the global competition, if you will, in this region. Who will have the final say? Will it be the U.S. that is talking about a post-Hezbollah period in Lebanon? Will it be Israel who wants to decide who is amicable to them, who can rule Lebanon, who can be in power in Gaza or in Palestine in general? Or will it be something more diplomatic, something more in line with international law, something that would save the system from seeming so useless at this point, so unable to protect civilians and stop a regional war, it seems, from breaking out, or a region teetering on the brink of an all-out war?
Nour, as you speak, we're getting more information about the nature of this attack. It is apparent now that the drone in question may have fired a missile towards the intended target before exploding there, and that Hezbollah succeeded in basically deceiving the Israeli air defense system, and then fired a barrage of missiles to cover the drone strike itself. It sounds like this is something planned, that this wasn't a random decision to fire a drone in this particular direction, but they did everything possible to make sure that this attack concluded in the way that they wanted it to. And we now know also, Nour, that the number of injured has increased to 40. Curious about Israeli opinions about all of this. We were talking to Ori Goldberg in Israel earlier, Israeli commentator, suggesting that this may only entrench opinions in favor of a more concerted war against Hezbollah.
I mean, we know that in terms of support, this war on Lebanon has a lot of popular support and political support in Israel. Nobody's discussing why this war is happening. They might be discussing tactics, what decisions should be made. There's also, of course, the families of Israeli captives who want the focus to be on Gaza, on reaching a ceasefire agreement that would see their sons and daughters freed, especially those who remain alive. But there is wide support for attacking Lebanon. And I have to tell you that in terms of media coverage and discussions, there seemed to have been a high of sorts when Israel was able to assassinate the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah, and then claiming that it had assassinated other very high-ranking officials in the organization. There was a lot of confidence. Netanyahu was talking about decapitating Hezbollah, ending it, even called on the Lebanese people to rise up and liberate Lebanon, as he said, from Hezbollah. So right now, that rhetoric might be changing, especially that we're talking about a sophisticated group with a large contingent of fighters. And as early as June, Hezbollah released footage, drone footage of sites, of military sites inside Israel that it said it could reach precisely, that it could target in case Israel escalated its attacks on Lebanon. So Israel knew that there was a bank of targets that Hezbollah had and the capability to reach those targets. There might have been maybe an overestimation of just how badly the Israeli bombardment affected Hezbollah capabilities. But it seems from these attacks that, they might have been celebrating a bit too early.
Nour, this is all extremely useful stuff as we try to get a more detailed picture of what exactly has happened here. Nour, if you learn anything, we will, of course, come back to you. Nour Odeh in Amman there. Let's bring in Elijah Magnier. He's a military and security analyst. So, Elijah, this is what we know so far. I mean, judging from the images that we've seen, it looks like there may be Israelis there in military uniform. The suggestion it could have been a military camp of some sorts. There's claims from Hezbollah that they are the ones who are responsible for carrying out this attack. And this other interesting line that the drone fired a missile towards the site before exploding there. And also, before I throw this to you, the fact that the alarm was not raised. All of that given the sophisticated defense systems that the Israelis have.
It is almost very difficult to intercept a drone unless Israel has jets in the air all the time. And this is what Israel has been doing recently. And the reason why the Americans and the Israelis and their allies intercepted the Iranian drones on the first attack is because they were all in the air waiting for these drones and missiles. This time, Israel has holes in its system. No system is perfect. And these kind of attack will be repeated over and over again. It shows Hezbollah has the capability to hit Israel. And of course, this is not going to fire back against Prime Minister Binyamina Netanyahu from the first drone or from the fifth one or after 10 or 20. It is the accumulation of casualties and the lack of achievement of objectives and a long war that is going to trigger the reaction. But that is a new rule of engagement that has been established where there are no more rules. And this is why Hezbollah, in this case, doesn't need a long-range strategic missile to hit Tel Aviv, because its objective now is more Haifa, without excluding the fact that it can send drones toward Tel Aviv, as it has done in the last week. But now the concentration is on Haifa, and Hezbollah is going to insist on it, in particular, when these drones are manufactured locally. So then there's no need to bring drones from abroad or from Iran and start shipping these drones, because the know-how is already in Lebanon.
Why Haifa?
Haifa because of the densely populated area in exchange of the suburb of Beirut that is densely populated, where more than 700,000 left their homes because they were ordered by Israel to leave. And the south of Lebanon also, it is the majority, overwhelming Shia population that were ordered to leave. And in the Bekaa Valley, it's the same. So Beirut now has a bulk of more than 1,100,000 Shia population that have left, even if there are also other religions, but that is the majority. And that is in exchange, Hezbollah is trying to create a balance with Haifa.
So Haifa is essentially a kind of mirror image of Beirut. Essentially, people have been forced to flee northern Israel, have relocated to Haifa, the population there has swollen. But is there any sort of military strategic importance to the city of Haifa itself? We know, of course, there's a port there. It looks as if this may have been a military camp.
Yes.
Is there anything else that we might know, particularly about Binyamina, which I understand is in the Haifa district, to be precise?
Haifa per se has the harbor of the Israeli Navy. It has the Dolphin submarines, it has the SAR Navy ship, and it has the oil depot, it has chemical depot, it's extremely dangerous to hit these targets by Hezbollah. And I think that will be an extremist, because hitting the chemical depot is going to create a devastating effect on Israel in general, but not only on Haifa. And hitting the oil depot also is going to be very devastating for the Israelis. Therefore, we start to see now indication where Hezbollah is hitting specific targets in Haifa, but Haifa is in the objective now, and this is the target, and Hezbollah is going to insist on it, plus the deployment of all the 4 divisions along the borders with Lebanon that they are prepared to invade the country.
Elijah, just to remind our viewers, this appears to be the largest Hezbollah attack on Israel since the war started. We have seen a huge amount of heavy weaponry fired into Lebanon in the past couple of weeks, ever since the latest upsurge in fighting against Hezbollah began. We've seen Yoav Gallant, Israel's defense minister, coming out and saying that 30% of Hezbollah's capabilities have been completely destroyed, along with their potential long-range capabilities. But what we are looking at is a low-tech solution coming from Hezbollah. Have we any idea where in the battlefield that we know of so far Hezbollah may have used a staging post, may have conducted this attack from?
Well, the distance for the drone not to be intercepted needs to be from the close vicinity of the borders. Secondly, those who are conducting the battle today are the forces deployed south of the Litani River and north of the Litani River. This is exactly where Israel is aiming to go into Lebanon and occupy. Therefore, these special forces of Hezbollah that are deployed there have never been engaged in a battle with the Israelis and in the first 11 and a half months, because the Israelis went and attacked the missile unit or the 11 and a half month or 12 months. And then it has bombed the strategic missile units in the Bekaa Valley. So we have not seen an engagement of the special forces because there was no direct contact with the Israeli forces. Now there is a direct contact with the Israeli forces, and the worst scenario is going yet to be shown when the Israeli will break into Lebanon in large troops. And this is where the Hezbollah special forces don't need really sophisticated weapons. They need the anti-tank laser-guided missiles, and they need only the IED explosive.
Are you suggesting that an incident like this may have potentially been used to goad Israeli forces into parts of southern Lebanon that Hezbollah will be more comfortable fighting Israeli troops on?
Much more comfortable, because it will have them very close. Now they are fighting from a far distance. They're using the jets, they're using the artillery, they're using the drones. And when they come close, jets can no longer operate, in particular when they are face-to-face combat. And this is where Hezbollah can have a balanced battlefield. Now, the upper hand is the Israeli technology and the dominance of the air. But once this will be put on the side and the Israeli move in and establish themselves in a static position, then this is where they will be more vulnerable.
Elijah, many thanks for all of that. Elijah Magnier,